put us in debt. They make money. The more debt we have, the more money they make because they earn interest on that debt. And so it is to their benefit. They're the only ones who benefit from debt. And they place everybody else, you, me personally, banks, companies, governments, in debt. It simply makes their coffers grow exponentially. And so the real question we have to ask ourselves is, do we want the concentration of power with all the things that we've seen with the Federal Reserve? Or do we want this to be a we the people type of thing, where the worst that could happen is tremendous, graft and theft and the other kinds of things that are involved. Mechanisms can be put in place, as you know, I run public companies. It's very difficult for me to steal from my company with the kinds of audits that we have to do. So those could be done in such a way that it would be very difficult to have wholesale disaster like we have with the Federal Reserve. So I think that those are the two fundamental questions that we have to wrestle with to try and answer your question.
Well, the mechanisms are in place. They're there. They're just not utilized. You want to control inflation, jack up interest rates to 50%. Or
with the Federal Reserve, that's a minor bit.
Outside of the Federal Reserve.
My question is, if we abolish the Federal Reserve, what mechanism will we have? Assuming we won't have partial backing of our monetary system.
With partial backing, I don't think you can control it completely. I think there still will be there. The only way to, I think, completely get rid of the inflation aspect would be to have a currency. One currency. Now, gold is a currency. Gold has been, there's so much talk. We don't want a global currency, we don't want a global currency. Gold is a global currency. It is, it's the universal currency. Now, the problem with having a global currency is the way that they've got it set up, talking about it, the G20, is it's just a basket of currencies, just like the euro. That's no different than the euro. Look what happened to the euro. It collapsed. And whenever you've got people managing this thing, it's not going to work. It's just still yet another fiat-based currency. Fiat-based currencies never last. So it has to have something with tangible backing. And unless it's full 100% tangible backing, inflation will always be an issue.
I also want to comment on, we talk about reserves, partial reserves to sustain a new system to back a currency. Can you comment on when the last time the actual physical metals were actually audited, and when the last of them was what they actually audited?
Well, that's a tough question to answer because the Federal Reserve is not auditable by law.
The gold in Fort Knox.
The gold in Fort Knox?
Yeah.
It used to be there, maybe still is there, who knows?
It's my understanding that the last time the physical inventory was actually audited, I think it was like 1950 something, and recently they've audited, when they audited it the last time, most recent, all they audited was the paper. They never went in there and audited the physical gold. Is that correct?
That's correct. The last time they actually counted it was then. That was only like 6 or 7 years after the Bretton Woods Agreement when we were made the reserve currency. Now, if you follow the metals movement, you can watch the Commitment of Traders and things like that and see physical deliveries going out across the world. It seems as though there's been a lot of gold leaving the United States, going to other countries, going to Dubai, going to Germany, going to various places. Well, where's that coming from? Possibly from Fort Knox. Nobody knows. But if you don't have a gold-backed currency, then there's really no reason for them to keep it. And you kind of go down the conspiratorial type road. Well, the internationalists don't want a high gold price because that's an affront against their currency system. So all of a sudden you have central banks releasing hoards of gold. And in the past, in the 80s and 90s, they did that. You'd have a couple hundred tons out there. All of a sudden, it would affect the gold price for 8 months. It would just go into a tailspin. But you do that now, which the European Central Bank and various places have done. They've released 200 tons of gold. Before the order even hits the desk, India gobbles it up. It might affect the price of gold for a day, but then it realizes, oh man, there's really a lot of demand for gold out there, and it does the absolute opposite and causes the price to go through the roof. So there is so much global demand for gold as a flight for quality is happening. It makes sense to me. It's the only thing that you
there's another aspect that we haven't talked about the Federal Reserve, and that's the fractional reserve part of the banking. And the education that will come about from suing the Fed is priceless. And let me give you an example. I'm going to ask you a question. Say you buy a $100,000 home and you take out a 30-year mortgage. When is that home paid for? I think any of you could take a crack at this if you think you know, by the way.
30 years.
So when the mortgage is paid for, 30 years, right? In fact, it is not. It's paid for the first week. And it's paid for because the bank is allowed to put that sale as an asset on their books. They now have a $100,000 asset. Well, where do they get the money to buy that house? They got it from the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve just printed it up. So that's how the bank owns your house. Paid for within the first week. But the fractional reserve part of that is now that bank takes that $100,000 asset, is allowed to hold that part in 10%, and they are now authorized to create $900,000 more of debt. So they go out and sell, say, for the sake of understanding, and everybody in this room, 9 other houses for $1,000. Now for $100,000. Each time that happens, it creates a new pyramid. And what we're talking about here is a pyramid system that is so vast that you can't even wrap your mind around how much money these people are making. And here's a list of what they've done with that money since 1913. Because when you have that much money, money is no longer an issue. The people who own the Federal Reserve have more money they can spend in the next 100 lifetimes. And so what is the game that they play after that? And history shows us that the name of the game is power. Because monetary needs, material needs, and power corrupts. And total power totally corrupts. So I've made a list of what they've done, because we can document what they've done, and then you'll understand why we're in the predicament we're in. They have bought up what are called, in sociology, power centers. This is what they've done with that money. They bought politicians, political parties, television networks, cable networks, newspapers, magazines, publishing houses, wire services, motion picture studios, documentary studios, labor unions, church organizations, trade associations, tax-exempt foundations, multinational corporations, even organizations like the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. They bought. So everything that can influence Americans and their opinions, and the most important things that they buy up are organizations and people that impose them. And that's what we need to understand. Because you see, this could be, if they didn't own the media, it would be very easy to get this information out, wouldn't it? I mean, what we're talking about is not some